Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. I'm from Shanghai SteelHome. Shanghai SteelHome is independent leading website in Chinese steel market, providing information, data, consultancy, etc. Today, my speech is outlook for Chinese steel industry. My speech has two parts. The first part is outlook for Chinese steel industry. Chinese steel industry was the main driver in world steel market since 2000, but it has worked into around our capacity. From 2012, Chinese created steel consumption may peak at around 750 million tons in 2015. Most Chinese steel production will be consumed in domestic market. China has hygiene overcapacity in lines and oversupply in France. Chinese steel industry now global competitive, but industrial concentration is low. Chinese steel companies will run measures and actions to achieve expansion. Chinese steel mills low primary export market-oriented plants, which is a list of Rebar, Wenzhang, and HRC countries on Shanghai Futures Exchange, and coking coal and iron countries on Dalian Commodity Exchange. Chinese steel market is crazy exported in financial fields in the upper comment future. Chinese steel company will gradually price their products in index basis or futures market basis. Chinese steel market price will become a barometer of the global steel price. One side Chinese steel trade had left the market since last year and more to level in the future. Steel distribution price will be shorted and will transfer to several countries and e-commerce. global iron ore market will see oversupply from 2014. China will be gradually less dependent on iron ore imports from 2020. The second part is the Chinese steel market in 2014. SteelHome predicted Chinese crude steel production, net export, and average consumption to be about 780 million tons, 15 million tons, and 730 million tons in 2030. China's steel output and export are to increase stated that will expect steel output, net export, and average consumption will be around 8 million tons, 50 million tons, and 715 million tons, respectively, in 2014. SteelHome expected Chinese iron ore import to increase 5.6% to 785 million tons in 2030, and like to be above 18 million tons in 2014. Forecasts of 2014 Chinese steel market are no growth in demand, no inventory, no price, high cost, and poor profitability. Chinese steel companies' performance will be slightly beat in the year. Average price of come from hit road predicts to be slight higher in 2040. 13. Flat market may outperform. Chinese origin import price might move in the range of 110 to 150 tons CIF for much time in 2013. It is likely to continue in 2014. However, in 2014, the average price may be slightly low from 2013. Average price price of coke and coking coal may be flat in 2014 from 2013. Macrology. China's steel industry has worked into all around overcapacity. Crude steel consumption may peak at 750 million tons. China is facing significant overcapacity in non-products. In the coming years, non-consumption is to denied and plans to rise in Chinese steel consumption. Chinese steel mills will gradually price their products on index basis or futures market basis. Chinese steel market price will become a barometer of the global steel price. Chinese steel market is ready for e-commerce, and SteelHome is exploring the best way to do it in China. Chinese crude steel output will like to break 800 million tons, and the domestic steel market may be run on the delicate balance in 2013. Welcome to SteelHome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. Are there any questions for Mr. Wu? Yes, Peter.
Hi, my question for Mr. Wu is, what will be rebar production in 2013, and what is his estimate in 2 or 3 years when taking into account housing, construction, and the increased use of higher quality rebar? You have it?
Sorry, are you asking the production in the next...
What is the production of rebar today, production in 3 years, and what will be the impact of the change in housing construction and the impact of the use of higher quality rebar in 3 years versus today?
今年现在那个 Rebar 的产量是多少？未来3年会是多少？那个现在建筑钢材怎么样？未来那个高端那个螺纹钢在产量3年有什么变化？
今年螺纹钢的具体产量可能在1.7亿吨左右吧。未来我们肯定都是高端的，就是 HRB 400到HRB 335已经淘汰了，中国已经不再有 HRB 335了。未来我们基本上是向 HRB 500和600方向发展。目前500和600比例非常低。
The rebar output in the year is around 170 million tons this year. So far, China's HRB 335 has already been eliminated in the country, and in the future, the high-end rebar is going to move to HRB 500 and HRB 600. But so far, the use of those two products is quite low in China.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom?
We hear quite a bit in the last few years about China cutting back on production and controlling their overcapacity issues. Over the next 2 years, how will the Chinese government control the overcapacity? And what are their plans to make true cuts?
中国一直在削减产能过剩的问题，中国政府有什么措施来保证那个产能降低？有什么措施降低产能？
因为关于中国钢铁产能过剩，如果按照我刚才看到土尾旗钢协的这个报告，那么中国的钢铁产能并不过剩，因为我们出口比例非常低。
When people are speaking about overcapacity in China, I just noticed the report by Turkish Export Association. Based on that, I don't think China has overcapacity problems because the export accounts for a very low proportion in China's output.
但是中国政府不支持钢铁产品大量出口。它对钢铁产品的出口，它的限制额在10%左右，超过10%这个比例就会出相应的关税政策。
The Chinese government does not actually encourage export. When the export proportion accounts for like 10%, the government will do something.
目前中国是通过中国政府是在几个方面。第一个在政策方面，现在已经出了中国的一个钢铁企业生产标准规范，那么必须达到这个规范的标准，将来才能允许生产。第二个是在环保上面加大环保的气查力度和这个能耗考核力度。
The government actually now imposes limitations on steel mills. One of the limits for Chinese steel mills. They can only produce when they meet the government's requirements. The other restriction comes from environmental protections and energy consumption.
所以明年的钢产量增长会减缓。钢产量增产会减缓。
So I think China's crude steel output next year would be the growth would be slower.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can we have the microphone?
There's been quite a widespread view that iron ore prices, specifically prices into China, would be declining towards 2015 as new supplies came on stream. Dr. Wu's charts don't particularly show that. Wondering if he could elaborate on what your view is for iron ore pricing trends, perhaps a little bit beyond 2014, and whether you expect prices indeed not to fall that much, and if so, why? Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear it clearly. Are you asking the price of Chinese iron ore contracts?
Yes, the slides that Dr. Wu showed, if I remember correctly, a fairly similar range in 2014 as this year. And given that there's been quite a widespread view that world iron ore prices and therefore Chinese import prices would tend to fall in the coming years, I'm wondering whether that is indeed your view. If you could elaborate a little bit on what trend you expect.
你说那个国际那个过剩问中国铁矿石2014年的后面的价格变化。
铁矿石价格是不仅仅是产量来供求来决定的，它很多方面是与铁矿石的开采成本还是有一定的关系。其实中国铁矿石的价格很大程度上是取决于中国低品位、高成本铁矿石的产量，就铁矿石价格。
The iron ore price is determined by different facts. One of them is the output in China and also the mining cost in the country. In fact, the price is largely determined by the mining cost in Chinese mines whose operation costs are quite high. The price is largely determined by the higher cost miners in the country.
所以我预计明年的铁矿石价格总的价格水平要低于今年，尽管运行的期间是一样的。
So, although I think the price in the next year will be the price ranges in the next year will be quite similar to this year, but I think the average price should be lower.
比今年低。
The average price next year would be lower from this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So, once again, thank you very much, Mr. Wu, for your contribution.